My name is Michael McMain. I am the CEO and founder of Xaviant and the creative director on Lichdom. We've got our game here, Lichdom Battlemage, and what we're bringing here in this game is what we believe is the first RPG where the mage is an unmitigated badass. And we've done this, we've accomplished this by removing constraints that are typically placed on mages like mana bars and cooldowns. And what we would do is, instead of you waiting around for cooldowns or abilities to come back, we focus on skill components. We've given you a couple of really cool defensive abilities and we weaponize them. So the first defensive ability is your block. And when you use your right mouse button to block, you ignore half of all damage. And if you time it just right, you have this galvanized period where you're completely invulnerable to damage. And anytime you're hit, you're going to detonate with a deadly nova. The second defensive ability is your blink. And there's two versions of this. There's a quick blink, which allows you to kind of dance around the battlefield quickly and dodge enemy attacks. But if you charge it up and you hold it, you can get a deadly nova that will explode, either freezing or killing your enemies. So as you can see, we're going through here, we're showing an example of, this is kinesis, which is about lifting enemies off the battlefield and moving them around. And then we have a fire spell that we're comboing up, where this is instead of being a projectile, this fire spell is a beam that allows you to just ignite your enemies and do this channeled effect on them. In addition, we have an ice spell that's about freezing your enemies and slowing them and causing big hitting damage. This level that we're looking at is the Maelstrom. It's a third level released in game. We're in early access. This particular build is our alpha build, which is going to go live this Monday. The game is going to release on August 26th, which is about 10 weeks away. So what we have here is Josh is switching over to a different combination of spells. He's taken his fire spell out and he's added a lightning spell. And now what he wants to do is he wants to set up this nuker play style. So he's going to build a lightning spell that's a targeted spell, a ranged spell, that is all about debuffing an enemy with mastery. So the first thing he's going to do is he's going to find out which one of these targeted components he wants to use. So he's selected the targeted component and he's looking at all the stats, and now he says, okay, I want to make this a mastery spell. So he's got this legendary mastery augment. And when he puts that in there, that defines a spell as a mastery spell, which is all about debuffing the enemy and setting them up for huge critical attacks. In addition, he's got a second slot, so he's going to add even more mastery. So now when he hits the enemies, this spell is not going to cause damage, but what it's going to do is set them up for extraordinary damage. So he's equipped the spell, and he's going to move into the next area here. So he's got his lightning spell all charged up, and you can see this enemy. Now when he hits this enemy with this lightning spell, it's not actually causing damage. But what it's doing is it's debuffing the enemy and setting them up for bigger attacks. And see you here, this is a control version of the lightning where he stunned his enemies so that they can't attack him back. And by comboing these different spells together, he can get very dramatic effects. So he lifts this enemy in the air, charges him up a bit with his mastery, and then closes it with a big, huge ice attack that just obliterates the enemy in one shot. Now what's interesting about this is if you're really good at it, you're going to get a lot of damage that is more damage than you need to kill the enemy, right? Which is overkill. And a lot of times you look at that and say, well, yeah, but overkill is kind of a waste, right? Why am I focused on that? Well, we have a system in place that we call Synergies. And in order to accomplish a synergy, this is a cataclysmic level event that, in this case, Josh has a singularity equipped. And the singularity synergy will suck enemies in and detonate and cause drastic, amazing damage. And if I tell you that you have something like a singularity in the game, the first question you're going to come back with me is, well, what's the cooldown on this, right? Well, we don't have cooldowns in this game, right? There's no mana, no cooldowns. So instead, you need overkills to feed that synergy meter. And when he gets enough of these overkills, he's going to have that singularity charged up and he can lay it down. So a really good player that focuses hard on getting it done is going to be able to pull them off quite frequently. So there's 8 different schools of magic in the game. We call them sigils, and they're all very, very different from each other. The player sets himself up, his build, so to speak, is choosing 3 of these sigils. Now in this case here, Josh has just pulled off the singularity. He sucks all these enemies in and just detonates them for devastating damage. And again, he can continue to try to do that by overkilling and building his spells even more powerful and playing even better. So this next area that he's moving into is what we call loot rooms. So our gameplay is a very tailored gameplay. You come into a map, you make your way through it to the other end, and you move through the story. And these loot rooms are different areas that reward the player for exploration. So when they come in and they find these little optional areas, there's a machine embedded in the ground, and when you hit it with a spell, like Josh is going to do here, you start an event. And in this case, there's a lot of different variations of these in the game. In this particular case, it starts spawning enemies. And as the enemies come in their waves, when you kill them, normally that loot that they drop would come to the player and go into your inventory. But in this case, when you're in this loot machine challenge, the loot doesn't come to the player when they die. It goes up into the machine. And when it goes up into the machine, as more loot is added to the machine, it can keep promoting in rarity. It can get better and better. However, the only way you're going to get that loot is if you completely defeat the encounter. So in some cases, you'll look up at the loot machine and you'll see, oh, there's a legendary in there. But the only way you're going to get it is if you defeat the encounter. If you die, you have to come back in and try again. So you can see here Josh is comboing up spells quite a bit. And he's doing this because he knows the later waves are much more challenging, and he wants to have a singularity or an ice storm maybe to pull off to try to help him defeat the waves. The health system for the game, you can see in the lower left corner there, is a 3-layered shield. And each one of those layers works like other games you might expect, like Halo or Borderlands, where you take damage, and as long as you don't lose the whole layer, it'll regenerate. However, as you can see here, Josh has lost 1 layer, so he only has 2 left. This enemy he's fighting right here is the Banshee, and she's not really that great of a damage dealer, but she's what we call a distractor. She'll scream and cause this icy aura to emanate from her, stunning the player. You saw him frozen there a moment ago. So Josh should be looking at coming up in his final wave here after he kills her. So as I mentioned, we've got 8 different sigils in the game, which are spell schools. There's 7 different ways to craft how you deliver those spells. There's things like the beam, the lob, the missile. And there you see he pulled off a singularity right as he was frozen and gets a pretty devastating effect out of it. So I think Josh is going to actually get through this wave and not die. And there he goes and gets all the loot from the loot machine. So now Josh is going to be advanced to the boss, and this is a new boss that we just added in the early access release. And for this he's going to switch back to fire because he thinks he can be more effective on the boss this way. And he's going to craft himself, let's see what he's going to do here. He's going to craft himself a flame wall pattern. So this is pretty cool. This is a legendary piece of loot that has the flame wall affix. And what that means is every time he does a nova, when he blinks into enemies with a charged nova, he's going to detonate a firewall and leave it persistent there to burn his enemies. And he can use it to hide behind. This particular map called the Maelstrom, when he comes in here, he'll take a look up. You're at the bottom of a frozen whirlpool that's got all this wrecked shippage and everything that has been frozen in the water. So we come down here and we see the new boss that we've added for our alpha release, which again goes live on Monday. And we have a nice, large crab boss here that spawns little enemies that come out and explode. So you can see here a lot of what we try to do is we give you these tools to not only deliver amazing, awesome spells, but it's about the skill component of how do I mix them together? How do I utilize lightning with fire and with ice in order to deliver the best possible attack? Another neat thing about our bosses is How many times have you played a game that you focus on an ice build that's got all this freezing, and you can freeze enemies solid, do this amazing things, and you get to the boss, and guess what? You can't freeze them. Well, all crowd control works on our bosses. However, they don't like it. So that green bar you see at the bottom, that's an enrage meter. As you CC the boss, he gets more and more angry, and when he becomes enraged, he's immune to crowd control for a period of time, but he also does more damage, has special attacks, and is much more hard. So Josh is using a lot of different combos here. See if he can pull off a flame wall. So there he is. So now the boss is sitting in a flame wall, burning. So again, the game is going live on August 26th. It's available on Steam right now in early access for $19.99. On Monday, when it goes live on alpha, it's going up in price to $24.99. In 5 weeks on beta, it'll go to $29.99, and then on release, it'll be $39.99.